The following program has been pre-recorded, so please don't call in at this time. If you wish to participate in the program, tune in at 5 p.m. every Wednesday for A Pause for Thought on Baton Rouge Community Radio. Good evening, fellow humans. This is Wayne Parker with A Pause for Thought on Baton Rouge Community Radio. Baton Rouge Community Radio's only live call-in show so far. We're hoping to get some more. Yes, you can call in, and I encourage you to do so and share your thoughts and insights on whatever topic is being discussed during the show. The only rule is that you state your point as an opinion or a suggestion and in a respectful manner. Anyone who tries to turn this into a rant show will be made to go away. Okay, with me in the studio tonight, if you've been listening to the station all week long, I have two guests from STAR Baton Rouge, which is Sexual Trauma Awareness and Response. And I'm here with Rebecca Marcia Fava, who is the Social Change Director. That's a tall order, Rebecca.
That's right.
Good evening. Glad to have you here. And Nicole Gillum, who is a licensed certified social worker with STAR, Sexual Trauma Awareness and Response. Where would you guys like to start? You want to, say, I would like to know what you're all about, what you do and all that. But we also want to make sure people know the important stuff, what kind of things you offer and how to contact you and your special discount date today at Whole Foods.
Sure. So I can give an overview of our mission and our services.
Okay.
And a little bit about our history. STAR was initially established as the Baton Rouge Rape Crisis Center in 1975. And from 1975 until 2012, we existed as a division of the East Baton Rouge Parish District Attorney's Office. And so we've been around for a while, for 40 years, a little over 40 years, but we've only been a nonprofit since 2012. So in that year, we incorporated as a nonprofit to be able to expand our funding opportunities and continue to work with our partners in East Baton Rouge Parish, but also be able to expand our services to some unserved and underserved areas that surround us. So that's a little bit about our history. So we have only been a nonprofit for 4 years, and our mission is to support survivors of sexual trauma, improve systems response. So we do work with law enforcement and medical systems to improve those responses for survivors. And we also work to create social change to end sexual violence.
Yes, I suppose the social change part would be the hardest.
It's all a pretty tall order.
Yes, but, you can't be tied to the results. Just do the best you can, right?
Right.
Okay. Well, I thought I heard somebody take a breath. Nicole?
I just wanted to add to that. And as Wayne was saying, I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I've been with the agency since it was Rape Crisis, and have worked with survivors for a long period of time. And so we really do work together, with the different levels of intervention to effect change in the community, whether it's on the individual level or the community level. And so we're working closely to make things happen.
Okay, different levels of intervention, you say. When I hear intervention, I think of the reality show, where the people get together and they beat up on one member of the family that's, behaving badly. But what do you mean by intervention, different levels of intervention?
At what point we come into the situation, whether it is prior to any violence occurring or after violence has occurred. And Rebecca can speak more to this as well because of the prevention aspect of things.
Yeah, I guess.
And the different levels of intervention.
What I was getting at was I thought you were talking about social change and an awareness and getting out there. So I was wondering if you were, by intervention, I was wondering, do you mean with individuals who have already been traumatized, or with the public institutions and things like that?
Yeah, so we do all of it. So basically what we know is that there are, as Nicole is saying, there are multiple ways and at multiple points we can work to intervene in the issue and address the issue. So when we talk about social change, the reason we frame it in those terms is that we really do view sexual violence as a social issue. And so in order to address it, we have to address it socially. And so that comes in when we're looking at, we have our survivor services. So just to go into a little bit of detail about our services and how that connects to our mission. We have our survivor services. So that is broken into 3 distinct programs, which are advocacy, counseling, and legal. And so in those programs, we have staff members who are primarily working with individual survivors, but all of that work with individual survivors, whether that is primary survivors, so the people who directly experience the sexual trauma, or loved ones and family members of those primary survivors. So whenever you're working with one individual survivor, you're still having to address issues that are connected to relationships,
Sure.
their interactions
The people
with
that know them
systems.
are going to say, "Why can't you just get over it?" and that kind of thing, right? Yeah.
Right.
Listen, I forgot to mention to the audience, you can call in to the show and comment, share your ideas and thoughts, and ask questions. The number here is 343-9927, 343-9927. If you're outside the calling area and live streaming at whyr.org, simply dial the area code 225 and then 343-9927. There you go. Rebecca, speaking of contact information, how would people get a hold of you guys?
Great. So we do have, really the best way is to contact us through our 24-hour hotline. So this hotline is available for people who may be in crisis, who maybe have just experienced a sexual assault and have no idea what their options are, what to do next. And it's also just for people who have general questions about the issue, or maybe who are, again, as we mentioned, family members or loved ones of survivors. So it's a 24-hour hotline, and that number is 1-855-435-STAR.
And your
And we also have a website.
website, yes.
Yeah, so that is STAR, STAR.NGO,
Yes,
which stands for Non-Governmental Organization.
And you do precede the star.ngo with www for all the other computer goobers out there. I always have to try different ways when people just say, "Oh, go to star.ngo," and I do it. It's like, doesn't work.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you mentioned about people with questions, and I certainly am one of them, but I wanted to get out the thing with Whole Foods here. It's a 5% discount today. 5% of the total of your purchase will go towards Star if
Right.
you go to that store today and buy stuff.
Right, so anyone who is a Whole Foods shopper today, 5% of their purchase price will go to benefit Star. So we're very excited and fortunate to be the beneficiary of that today.
Sure, and that gets you some publicity too, and it's all about getting people to know you're out there. I'm sure there are a lot of people who will be glad to learn that you exist.
Yeah, and just to be clear, because I know this show replays, the date of that
Ooh, good
5%
point.
day is Wednesday, February 17th.
Yes,
so that's
today.
the day we're referring to.
17th, right. Yeah, good point. Hey, you're thinking faster than I am, which probably isn't any big feat. But I went to your website, Rebecca and Nicole, and I saw the first place that said, "Star is looking for highly motivated and passionate women and men interested in working with sexual trauma survivors in our community." You let men talk to sexual trauma survivors?
Yes.
I can't imagine. I would not want to do that, not without a woman standing next to me with a club, because I'd say some stupid guy thing thinking I was helping,
Well, we have wonderful training opportunities so that you would know maybe what to say and how to respond. And something else is that we see this happening to males as well.
Really?
To men. Yeah, so what we want are people that can work with a diverse population, because what the reality is that people are being assaulted regardless of background, age, race, gender. That's the reality.
I remember when I was in high school, a very popular pop singer was brutally beaten and raped, and she was a star. And I just thought to myself, wow, how traumatizing that must have been, even though I probably at that age didn't even know what the word was. Speaking of trauma, though, what is sexual trauma?
What a great question.
Well, we always hear about it, and we assume it's, it's feeling bad about, something done terribly to you, regarding sex, but what specifically? What does it do to people?
Well, I'll start and I'll let Nicole add on with her expertise. But, just to start in general, trauma is basically when a person's ability to cope is overwhelmed. And so whenever someone experiences a traumatic event, it can really challenge a person's ability to cope with the situation. And it also, when we're looking at trauma, what we're talking about is a physiological and neurobiological situation. Okay, so if somebody is in a life-threatening situation, which rape and many forms of sexual trauma are, it basically shuts off the thinking part of the brain, and it's flooding the body with a variety of hormones. And so the brain is sent into this, it's focusing on one goal, which is to survive the situation. So that's when we see those traumatic responses of fight, flight, and freeze.
I've talked with that and encountered that in descriptions of combat veterans with post-traumatic stress disorder, and I'm guessing this is closely related to that.
Absolutely. PTSD is a common impact of rape. Oftentimes when we do hear about PTSD in the media, it's associated with combat veterans and military experiences in the military, but what is important to recognize is that there are actually more men in our country who are experiencing PTSD due to sexual trauma.
Wow.
More so than experiences in combat.
Okay, that brings me to, I guess, a typical guy question, but I made you guys promise not to hit me, because I mean well. You say, I don't know, does everybody, I guess, who is sexually assaulted suffer the same symptoms? Does everybody have the same response? Is everybody affected by it terribly?
No. No. People do not have the same response. I would say it's definitely on an individual basis because there's other factors involved, Wayne. So some people may have a really, really good support system, which is vital to healing. Some people may also have a good response when they report. They also may have healthy coping skills already in place that they've used in the past. And so it is on an individual basis. Some people may be at a higher risk to experience greater effects. There are some common symptoms that do occur. Nightmares. And these symptoms that do occur may happen initially and then taper off.
Right.
And depending on some of these other factors, some people may go through the healing process at a different pace than another person.
And then again, that would depend on their support network, how much empathy they were getting, how much understanding, how many educated people who know the ins and outs can recognize symptoms, can point things out to them. Sure.
And just to connect that back to our services too, when we are talking about our mission to create social change to end sexual violence, part of that is looking at how can we promote healthy norms and healthy behaviors so that people will not even perpetrate these types of crimes. But another component of our social change work and community education and engagement work is to try and work to ensure that people are informed enough about the issue where they can respond supportively to their loved ones who do experience sexual trauma. Because as Nicole is mentioning, there are a number of factors that impact an individual survivor's ability to recover, or what that recovery looks like. And so if a person does have a supportive, has a really strong social support system and network that is empathetic and that is supportive and doesn't blame them for what they were doing at the time of the assault, for instance, that actually can go a really long way in helping somebody recover either more quickly or just simply be able to address the trauma.
Okay. Sure, and I want to remind our listeners, we're listening to Rebecca Marshafava and Nicole Gillum with STAR, Sexual Trauma Awareness and Response. Feel free to call in 343-9927 or area code 225-9927. We have a call right now, so let's go ahead and pick them up. Good evening, you're on the air with a pause for thought. May I ask who's calling?
Hi, this is Jim Brolian.
Yes, Jim. You there?
I have a question.
Okay.
two things have come up. One is it's against the law to assault people. Are they involved in working with the police, the district attorney's office? And how do they handle that?
Okay. Was that it? Or
Second is, besides Whole Foods, how are they funded?
Oh, yes. Oh, okay. Anybody?
Okay.
You're still on the air with Jim. You're on the phone with Jim, by the way.
Yeah. Hi, Jim. So to address your first question, we do work with law enforcement. So that's part of our mission in terms of improving systems response, is to be able to work with the systems that survivors encounter in the aftermath of an assault. So one thing that is important to know related to, law enforcement response is that rape it remains the most underreported crime in our community. There's a lot of fear of not being believed, fear of being blamed for the assault that victims have, and there are a lot of things that can reinforce that in an individual's social environment. So there's a lot of shame, a lot of silence, a lot of confusion that can come that can prevent survivors from even coming forward to disclose or report what has happened to them.
Go ahead, Nicole.
And excuse me. And we do also offer. We have many volunteers that help us to accomplish this mission, and will volunteer their time to meet survivors at the hospital as they go through the forensic exam, and possibly do report to law enforcement. So we do encourage reporting. And at the same time recognizing all the obstacles and the difficulties and challenges with going forward with a criminal justice or a criminal charges.
Right.
So we do work closely with law enforcement in the DA's office. I just wanted to let you know about the volunteer opportunities as well for going to the hospital with survivors.
Now, people... Go ahead, Mark.
Just to clarify even further, when we say we work with them, we do collaborate with them. We are primarily a victim advocacy center. So our services to survivors of sexual trauma are free and confidential. So I just want to emphasize that for anybody who is listening, who may be thinking about, contacting us at STAR as a survivor to find out options and seek services.
That's what I was going to ask, actually, was, okay, you work with law enforcement, but if somebody comes to you who has been raped, you're not going to automatically call the cops.
Absolutely.
No.
Right. Okay, yeah, the confidentiality and their needs are the first thing that come up.
And they are able to get an exam without reporting as well.
Good.
So we're not there to, push that issue for them to report to law enforcement. We
Right.
just do, and we encourage it so that we can further prosecution of the offenders that are doing this behavior.
Get them off the street, yeah.
Doing these crimes.
Yeah, and as I've heard, the actual tests they do after a woman is raped, if she does come in, and can be just as invasive and frightening as the experience itself.
And that's why it can be really helpful to have a sexual assault victim advocate present during the exam. The role of the advocate really is to be focused on that survivor's needs throughout the process, whereas everybody else has another goal in mind. The advocate really is there to be focusing on that person and helping support
Right.
them through that process.
Would they have a veto power over anything that people who were treating them or investigating would do? And I'm just curious. If you don't know, that's fine. But I mean, would they be able to say, "Look, she's had enough. Get lost"?
Oh, not necessarily. But they will be able to speak up, for instance, if the survivor is trying to express some sort of need and other people are not necessarily listening
Picking
to
up.
that, then they can, advocate for them.
She can hear the more subtle inferences and things like that.
Because
Okay, sure.
that advocate will be more directly focused on.
Notice I assumed it would be a woman as the companion. Would there be a man in that situation, or would he be just strictly for when men were sexually assaulted?
No, we actually have people available males to go out to the hospital as well.
Interesting. I'd like
Now,
to...
they do have the option to not have that person in the room, whether male or female, during that exam. We're there primarily for support and, to advocate
Right.
for their needs.
And yeah, and if they don't want you in there, you don't go in.
That's
As
right.
simple as that. Another thing you mentioned too, that I've always been baffled about, I guess because I'm a guy, the idea of shame. Why should anyone feel ashamed about being sexually assaulted? Is that a cultural thing with us, or? And I can imagine it with men because he violated my manhood or whatever. It's unmanly to have that happen to you. But why? I mean, I believe that women do feel shame, but I can't grasp as why. Why would a woman think it was her fault?
One of the things that we typically as a society do not discuss in the open is now having to be discussed.
Probably partly because it hasn't been discussed in the open before.
Mm-hmm. And now someone has experienced this in a traumatic way. They've had a negative experience with something that has already previously been shamed.
Okay,
So-
you mean like promiscuity, or for girls anyway, that's always been shamed, and therefore when it happens to them, their brain chemistry kicks in and the old response comes in. Is that what it is?
Well, and what is society teaching? What is society teaching about how you're supposed to conduct yourself as a male and female?
Oh, so the old she asked for it sort of thing. She was wearing sexy, yeah. Okay.
Victim blaming and some of our societal norms currently tend to perpetuate this idea of this feeling of shame.
Yes, no, I see that. I see what you mean. And really, it's so ingrained in us that people who don't mean to be cruel might still think, well, didn't she ask for it because she was wearing these low-cut jeans and blah, 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 And it may be a totally innocent perspective, not trying to be mean. They just think,
Absolutely. And another thing that we talk about when we're looking at victim blaming or victim shaming that is unintentional, right? Well-intentioned. Because a lot of people, one of the things we look at is when people are focusing on what the victim was doing at the time of the assault, right? And the intent behind that might be to say, well, if I can say that the victim was doing something wrong, then either I as a victim or a loved one of the victim can say, well, if you don't do this next time, then you will be safe.
Right.
But what actually happens is that when we do focus so heavily on the victim's behaviors at the time of the assault, that is part of what creates the shame. Because not only have you been traumatic, not only have you endured this traumatic, and not just traumatic, but the most intimate and violating type of trauma that you can experience, but it was your fault, right? You were doing something wrong. That's the common attitude. And so that's why when we're talking about, where should we be focusing our attention when we are examining an incident of sexual assault, we really need to be looking at who is the person who committed this assault and why did they think that that was acceptable behavior. Even if it is illegal, it's still commonly accepted and tolerated.
Yeah, I can't imagine it being accepted, but obviously it is tolerated.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a perception. I just wanted to
go
add
for
to
it.
that.
It's your show.
There's a perception of, thank you, of guilt or personal responsibility because of the society that kind of perpetuates victim blaming. And so that guilt can kind of morph into this shame as well.
Sure.
So those two kind of go hand in hand, the guilt and shame, and it's not their fault.
No.
At all. So yeah, so we work heavily with individuals on reducing that sense of shame. So.
And Rebecca, you mentioned that they often focus more on the behavior of the victim. Mm-hmm. And I've read numerous times, in fact I experienced once, but we as relatively healthy human beings, I mean we all have our dark spots and everything, but we don't think like criminals. We don't think like predators. And so they have the edge on us. And like I said, I experienced that firsthand one time in my life. I was just lucky that the way the guys that approached me weren't meaning harm. They just wanted to know what I was doing in their neighborhood. But if they had wanted to, I went in there thinking I was prepared, and they had me dead to rights if they wanted to kill me or do something, But then I realized I said, I'm too much of an innocent. And most of us are. We, you tend to see things as they are, as we are, not as they are in reality. So, you mentioned before, okay, you're trying to get the word out, and of course, I think it's absolutely important, albeit so difficult, to change societal norms. What other help are you getting out there? Are there any other organizations, religious organizations, Together Baton Rouge, anybody like that? Any civic organizations that are involved with your cause?
I mean, we have a number of community partners that we work with, and we're always, of course, looking to partner with community agencies. So, I mean, really in the broader sense, what we are promoting is we're promoting healthy, positive, pro-social behaviors overall. Sexual violence is a form of power-based violence. It is a form of interpersonal violence. And so when we're looking at, not just the violence itself, but all of the root causes that create such high rates of sexual violence, this is connected to pretty much every other form of violence and a lot of other forms of oppression. So, we take the approach that there are always shared goals that we can discuss, and there's always common ground to be found, even if we do have some different beliefs or different specific objectives.
Right. No, and I think reducing violence in this country probably should be everybody's priority, because I don't know what it is with us, but we just seem to be a very angry and violent people. I mean, I think a lot of our citizens feel isolated, and that breeds the anger and everything else. So, yeah, I can imagine that you would need that sort of thing. Okay, you're listening to A Pause for Thought. We've got about 4 minutes to go. I have representatives from STAR, Sexual Trauma Awareness and Response for Baton Rouge, with Rebecca Marcia-Fava and Nicole Gillum. Rebecca, you have something?
Yeah, I just wanted to bring it back. The previous caller, Jim, also had a second question about funding.
Yes.
And so I did just want to briefly touch on that because we do have diverse sources of funding. So when we were part of the DA's office, we only received, of course, funding through local government, which we do still receive local government funding. We are also funded by federal funds, local foundations, and, of course, individual donations and fundraising events. So those are our diverse funding sources. And, we could the need is enormous. So, we are fortunate that we have been able to increase our funding recently, but there is such a huge need for these services that it never feels like enough.
No, and unfortunately, to be generous, people are so busy working for a living and taking care of their children, they don't have time to get involved in so many things that they'd like to. I'd like to think that everybody would get involved in that sort of thing if they could. But, I guess...
And I will say, we're very fortunate in that we do have a number of highly committed volunteers who have gone through a 40-hour training to become sexual assault victim advocates who, take hotline calls and go out to the hospital at all hours of the nights and on holidays. And so, and then on our prevention side, we have a Prevention Action Coalition where a number of our community partners engage with us through quarterly meetings and ongoing conversations and relationship building. So we really are, building thriving relationships and partnerships with a number of individuals and organizations in the community. And so that's something that keeps us going. And we know that there is hope.
Do you have any outreach yet for schools?
Absolutely. So we do, we have a phenomenal youth educator named Dominique. And so she provides education to youth in grades 4 through 12. Using a variety of curriculums that are focused on promoting healthy behaviors and relationships. And we also manage a peer education program for teens called 3D Peer Educators. So we are very focused on youth education, and we view youth as partners in the work to create a community that's more supportive to survivors and more conducive to healthy relationships and less conducive to sexual trauma.
Right, but it's funny you're saying that now, and I can imagine myself coming home from school and sharing information that you've shared here with a certain parent, and he would, oh, that's nonsense, blah, 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 liberal foolishness, that kind of thing, and it would be stifled. So you need to reach the kids, of course, but you need to get to the parents, too.
And that's why we also focus on adult education. So we have a variety of trainings, not just our volunteer trainings, but trainings that are available for adult community members.
Okay, that's good. Again, you want to give your contact information before we go completely off? We've got a few. Well, actually, we don't. But go ahead and give your contact information real quickly. And then we'll
Okay,
go.
so our website is www.star.ngo, and our 24-hour hotline is 855-435-STAR.
Okay, thank you very much, Nicole and Rebecca.
Thank you.
And you've been listening to A Pause for Thought on Baton Rouge Community Radio, 96.9 FM in Baton Rouge, and we are out of here. Thank you very much.